We have new numbers for the sale of mainline and also spin-off Pokémon Games, and oh boy, there was a change that made some people angry. Not as many as I thought there would be, which is honestly a pretty good thing. So as of March 31st, 2025, the top-selling games are still Pokémon Red, Blue and Green with over 31 million copies sold, but the biggest change comes at number 2, where before was Pokémon Sword and Shield, an already controversial game, but now with 26,790,000 copies sold stands Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet. So hey, I'm not so a strainer, and what does this mean? Let's get into it. When Pokémon Sword and Pokémon Shield surpassed Pokémon Gold and Pokémon Silver as the second best-selling Pokémon games, people went a little bit insane. The games that supposedly were the worst and the most damaging to the franchise were the second best-selling ones. Then new games came out and the hate cycle turned to the other side, where Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet came along. Now these were the worst and most damaging to the franchise, and the hate cycle began again. It didn't help that while Sword and Shield felt like a shortcoming for some but was mostly stable, Scarlet and Violet clearly needed a little more time in the oven, which made it so the voices or the keyboard clicks of those angry were just that much louder. It was hard to argue against the technical side of things because Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet really had some problems. Most of them, the really bad ones, were fixed on the day one patch, but some of them are still there and the game still kinda runs in a very lackluster way. Almost as lackluster as not liking, subscribing and joining the channel. But the game sold pretty well nonetheless, and right from the get-go. During the first 3 days of the game being out, it sold over 10 million copies, and that puts the game well above Pokémon Platinum, Pokémon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, Pokémon Crystal, Pokémon Emerald and Pokémon Black 2 and White 2. 3 of those are single version games, so they will sell less, but 2 of them are not, and they still sold less than Scarlet and Violet in 3 days. Before I continue though, what is your favorite Pokémon game? Let me know down below. This meant that the new Gen 9 Pokémon games were the biggest launch in the history of Nintendo, and set the game up on its way to eventually surpass Pokémon Sword and Pokémon Shield as the second best-selling games. Their complaints were straight up plastered all over social media platforms, with people saying that Game Freak would never make a good game again because the quote-unquote bad ones were selling so well. They would never have to try, and they would never even fix the issues anymore. This is, of course, very stupid. Pokémon games, despite their similarities, are indeed very much different. Games like Sun and Moon are definitely different than Ruby and Sapphire, and Pokémon X and Y is 100% different from Pokémon Gold and Pokémon Silver. And the Gen 2 games had a lot more sales than the Gen 3 games and the Gen 6 games and the Gen 7 games. So it's not the sales that kinda show them the way, it's that they have a vision that they want to bring to life. This discourse kinda slowed down a little bit after 2 things happened. The first one was that Game Freak stopped for 1 year. They literally did what people said they wouldn't do and gave themselves time, even if just a single year. This took away one argument, the one that they wouldn't change a thing due to their recent success, they would just pump out games. The second thing was that what we've been seeing out of Pokémon Legends ZA actually looks like a game that feels like it's gonna be good. There are barely any complaints you're finding online. Not only that, despite it being visually similar in art direction to Scarlet and Violet, but changing the realistic textures of Pokémon, it is clearly different from the flagship Gen 9 game. They are, by the looks of it, trying something new once again. But this still doesn't answer the question of what does this mean for the Pokémon franchise, for the future of the Pokémon franchise. And you know why it doesn't answer that question? Well, it doesn't answer that question because it doesn't really matter. You are not ruining the franchise by enjoying or buying the latest Pokémon title. It works for both sides of the argument because some people are comparing sales to quality and you can't really compare those. Something that is selling a lot is not necessarily good, it is popular. And something that is good can't really be defined that well because, it differs from one person to the other. What it tells you is that people are interested in these titles. In fact, it tells you that even after the apparent controversial release of Pokémon Sword and Shield, people played those games, and even then they decided to give Gen 9 a chance. It means that what happens in this online space, on Twitter, on YouTube, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, because we're just a small part of the Pokémon community, the grand Pokémon community. I have released a video on Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet and my review of the game plus DLC, and yeah, you should absolutely check that out after, but spoiler alert, I liked it. I really did. I liked its characters, I liked its freedom, and I liked its mysterious lore that is still a mystery to this very day. At the same time, I really didn't like the lack of optimization and technical issues. But they weren't at all game-breaking issues, at least for the most part, as they rarely messed up to that point. They were simply frustrating, and looking at the games, I can see why most people enjoyed them and why they sold to the point that they sold. If you don't have someone screaming in your ear about how you shouldn't like these games, as most people do not have someone doing so, you won't have any second thoughts when buying them and playing them. Pokémon, despite its growing age, is still as popular as ever, maybe even more. These sales are 100% a reflection of that as well. A fair number of people that grew up with Pokémon games still play every single game, and a lot of people are joining the Pokémon fan club every single year, be it through the anime, through Pokémon cards, through Pokémon Go, or even through the mainline games. It keeps growing. Pair that with a console, the Nintendo Switch, that sold like crazy, and you have a recipe for a media monster that cannot be stopped. In fact, there's a technical update for Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet on Nintendo Switch 2, which means that the numbers might grow even more, with some people that refused to get the previous version getting it now to enjoy those sweet stable FPS. Only once did I feel like a Pokémon game was heavily influenced by the sales of its predecessor, and that was Pokémon X and Y coming from Black and White and Black 2 and White 2. Gen 5 is notorious for being loved nowadays, but it really wasn't back in the day. It tried a new approach with many new Pokémon and a lack of focus on the old nostalgic ones. It wasn't what the franchise needed at the time, and I feel like that's the reason why X and Y had so much of Kanto in it. It was to make sure that the mistake wasn't made again. Nowadays, well, every game seems to have its own concept and vision and is completely disconnected from the last one in terms of gameplay style and art direction. Especially the Switch games, which are unique down to the remakes. The only thing that the sales numbers for Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet mean is that Pokémon is at an all-time high, and that everything that they're trying, those experiments, those risky decisions, they're paying off because the community is enjoying them. Not just the online community, you know that complaining gets you attention and makes it seem like you are the biggest part of it all, but the overall community, the people that are not always online. It means that they are on the right track, and Pokémon Legends CA looks like another success, especially being a cross-gen release, the first cross-gen release. And Gen 10, I'm pretty sure is gonna be a wonderful successor for Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet. Just don't let the hateful crowd ever tell you how to enjoy a Pokémon game. Just enjoy it. Don't let anyone ruin that for you. But now, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one. But before I go, I want to thank my YouTube members Dash Plays and Yahtzee, and my Twitch subscriber Anubis here for going that extra mile. Thank you so much for all of your support.